The chamber was filled with gasps, not from lack of oxygen, filters took care of that, but from the sick, collective understanding that something irreversible had happened. Floating above the table was a hologram. It showed the Lumin homeworld, or what remained of it. Cities reduced to ash, oceans boiled, mountains pulverized into smooth black glass. One by one, the images flickered past, each worse than the last. Then came the numbers. Population, 9.8 billion survivors, 342 million, unaccounted, 88 million confirmed dead, 9.37 billion, and finally, percentage of population exterminated, 97%, high arbiter. Xvoon cleared his throat. His voice wavered, unnatural for his species. This was not war. This was not conquest. This was extermination. The Vex Imperium has committed genocide against the Lumin species. Silence. Then the murmurs started. The chamber held representatives from 273 species, some gelatinous, others encased in rigid bone armor, some entirely gaseous and communicating through vibrating crystals. But for all their differences, their reactions were mostly the same. Shock, then caution, then politics. Perhaps a trade embargo, offered Chancellor Reem, adjusting the pressure valves on his thorax. If we restrict their access to the nebula silk trade, they'll feel the sting of condemnation. Or we bar them from the next Cultural Harmony Summit, said Delegate Rinva, her many eyes blinking out of sync. Make them feel the shame of exclusion. Director Okonkwo of Earth did not speak. She hadn't since the Lumin death toll had been confirmed. She simply stared ahead, motionless, unblinking, too still. High Arbiter Voon waved a claw. Let us not rush into extremity. Civilization is not built on vengeance but on order. We cannot abandon process. They abandoned process when they sterilized oceans, said Okonkwo softly. Heads turned. It wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. Each word landed like a metal chair dragged slowly across stone. The delegates, many of whom had never interacted with Earth's representatives beyond cultural exchanges and economic treaties, noticed it for the first time. Earth had gone quiet, and quiet wasn't safe. Okonkwo rose. She wore no robes, no ornaments, just a black, sharply cut suit. I've listened. I've heard the suggestions, exclusion, trade punishment, moral disapproval. She stepped forward. I'm sure the Lumin will be deeply comforted to know that their exterminators might miss the next music festival. A few delegates shifted uncomfortably. You are proposing polite disapproval for the murder of a civilization, for the televised decapitations, for mass incinerations, for children, burned, live. She pointed at the hologram still looping footage of the atrocities. One image now, a scorched cradle in the ruins. That, she said, is not something you can sanction away. The Plurite ambassador, a hulking insectoid wrapped in ceremonial green cloth, clicked his mandibles nervously. But vengeance does not bring back the dead. Okonkwo turned to him. Vengeance? Who said anything about vengeance? Her voice dropped half an octave. This isn't about vengeance. This is about consequences. Outside the chamber, reporters waited. News feeds flickered through every capital system. The Vex Imperium hadn't denied the genocide. They had broadcast it. They called it purification, cleansing. Unworthy DNA expunged, said one of their generals, smiling for the cameras. They expected condemnation. What they didn't expect was silence. From Earth. The species that couldn't shut up. The ones who posted everything, every dance, every lunch, every spacewalk selfie. Now, nothing. No hashtags, no music, no late-night comedy. Earth had gone still, and across the galaxy, fear began to bloom. Back in the chamber, someone, an aquatic diplomat from the Makari Confederacy, asked, "What does Earth propose then, if not diplomacy?" Okonkwo looked at her as if she'd asked whether stars were flammable. We gave diplomacy. We gave talks. We gave warnings. We gave history. She walked to the center of the chamber, where the circular council table shimmered with names and emblems. Then she did something Earth's diplomats had never done. She reached under the table and pulled out a wooden box. No one had seen it placed. It had no digital markers, no security locks, no glowing lights, just wood, ancient, burnished, etched with names. Okonkwo opened it slowly. Inside were medals, human medals, time-worn, scorched, bloodied. She held one up. This is from the Battle of Stalingrad. Earth, 1942. Over 2 million dead in a siege that lasted 6 months. She held another. This one's from Rwanda, 1994. 800,000 dead in 100 days. Another. This is from the gulags, from the Great Purge, from the Trail of Tears, from Nanking, from Hiroshima. From every place humanity learned what genocide meant long before we left our gravity well. She closed the box and locked it. This isn't the first time we've seen monsters, she said. It's just the first time we stopped pretending not to be one too. Panic didn't erupt immediately, not in that chamber. But across the stars, diplomats contacted their intelligence officers. Military analysts pulled up archived war footage of Earth. Because unlike the Vex, humans didn't broadcast their horrors. They documented them, catalogued them, studied them, and buried them beneath smiles, pop songs, and diplomatic pleasantries. But now Earth had gone quiet. No one knew what came next, except, maybe, Earth. On a cold, silent deck in low orbit above Saturn, Admiral Jules Thorne received a single message. It read, "Now we stop being civilized." He nodded and issued the first order. "Prepare Ghost Fleet Protocol." Admiral Jules Thorne wasn't the kind of man who dealt in drama. He drank black coffee, hated awards ceremonies, and once told a Zan diplomat to please shut up during peace negotiations because they wouldn't stop quoting poetry. But when he read the message from Director Okonkwo, something in him clicked. Not snapped, not broke. Clicked, like a seatbelt before a crash. "Ghost Fleet Protocol," he said calmly. "Authorize silent mobilization." His XO blinked. "All of them, sir." Jules didn't look up from his tablet. "Yes, Earth just gave us the green light to remember who we are." Across the solar command grid, ancient protocols activated. Buried subroutines embedded into Earth's military software decades ago. Silent launch codes, encrypted pings, old warbirds, ships so secret they weren't even listed in Earth's own fleet manifests, began to wake. No fanfare, no broadcast, just cold, methodical revival. The Ghost Fleet, humanity's unspoken failsafe, built in orbital dry docks scattered across uninhabited star systems, long considered budget black holes by the Galactic Council's auditors. Turns out, the budget wasn't a black hole. It was a black box. And inside it, Earth's original sin, preparedness. Back at the Galactic Council, the Vex Imperium delegation hadn't yet realized how badly they'd screwed up. Ambassador Kuros, a tall, armored brute with a voice like gravel and arrogance like a perfume, tapped his claws on the console and leaned forward. "All these dramatics," he hissed. "Do you think your little mammal planet can threaten the Imperium?" He turned toward Okonkwo. "We've crushed civilizations older than your star charts. We absorbed the Valari, the Kryn, the Ezotari. And you think Earth frightens us?" Okonkwo tilted her head, just slightly, then smiled. "Number Earth doesn't frighten you." She leaned forward. "That's the problem." The Galactic Newsnet lit up with panicked speculation. Earth ceases all trade talks. UN fleet disappears from official registry, again. Why did Terra cancel the cultural exchange program with the Iuk monks? Is this humanity's war posture? Diplomats scrambled for statements. Earth issued none. Their embassies turned off lights. Their feeds went dark. On the social net known as Streamline, a single image trended galaxy-wide. A black screen. One word. Remember. The galaxy had no idea what it was supposed to mean, but the humans did. Ambassador Kuros returned to his diplomatic vessel, still gloating, still arrogant, still drunk on conquest. His comm officer approached nervously. "Sir, we intercepted several low-frequency pulses originating from the asteroid belt." Kuros sneered. "So? They match no known civilian communication format, but the encryption signature is Terran." Kuros laughed. "Let them posture. Let them play with their toys. They're a minor species, a footnote in our expansion." He turned to his crew. "Remind them what fear tastes like. Begin maneuvers near Alpha Centauri. Let's see if they squeal." His first officer hesitated. "Sir, you may want to see this first." The screen flickered. A satellite view. One of the Vex's forward listening outposts, Station V131. Now just debris. No warning, no broadcast. On Earth, President Elena Mora stood before a blacked-out press corps. She wore a simple coat, no flag pin, no special lighting. "I will not speak long," she said. "The Galactic Council wishes to process this atrocity through policy. We will not stop them." She looked directly into the camera. "But Earth is done processing genocide." Pause. "We are no longer diplomats." She leaned forward. "We are witnesses." The signal cut. In the Andari sector, a Vex supply convoy disappeared en route to its core colony. 10 ships. Gone. No distress. No wreckage. Just static. A single message arrived at their headquarters, embedded in an ancient Terran codebase. Balance sheet cleared. The Galactic Council finally convened an emergency war session. This time, Earth did not attend via hologram. They showed up physically. A single ship, a sleek, obsidian dreadnought, landed on the Council's upper docking ring, triggering gravitational warnings across 3 levels. Its arrival wasn't announced. It was detected. By the tremor in the floor, by the sudden drop in chamber temperature, by the air that tasted like static electricity. Okonkwo stepped out, flanked by 2 human soldiers in matte black exosuits. No insignia, no visible weapons. Their presence was louder than any speech. High Arbiter Hizvoon stood, visibly rattled. "Director Okonkwo, we—" She raised a hand and walked to the center of the chamber. "This council has always feared chaos," she began. "You believed law was protection. That order alone could hold back monsters." She gestured to the void above them. "But monsters don't obey laws." A long pause. Then she said it. The phrase that would echo across history texts in hundreds of languages. "So Earth will stop pretending to be civilized until civilization means something again." Admiral Thorne watched from orbit as authorization codes blinked green. Ghost Fleet was active. Ships began warping across systems, silent, unannounced, unregistered. The Vex Fleet began to notice gaps in their own patrol grids, empty sectors, dark stations, abandoned signal buoys, no signs of explosions, just missing, as if erased. Aboard the command deck of the human dreadnought Gravedancer, Thorne received a message. Phase 2 approved. Let's remind them what forgetting us costs. The Vex Imperium finally responded with their typical bravado. They declared Earth a rogue entity, demanded sanctions, threatened full war. The Council, as always, began deliberations. But their messages to Earth went unanswered. And that silence? It was worse than any declaration of war. Because when humans stop talking, they're already walking toward the trigger. Admiral Jules Thorne didn't believe in speeches. He believed in impact. Onboard Gravedancer, now stationed in the unregulated corridor between Vex territory and neutral space, he leaned over the operations console and stared at the incoming data. 6 Vex patrol fleets, standard formation, predictable vectors. ETA before they cross the demilitarized zone? He asked. 34 minutes, Admiral. Jules nodded. Good. Deploy Echo Wing. Don't engage directly. I want a clean ghost. The XO frowned. You're not going to intercept? Jules gave him a slow, patient look. Intercept. Number He turned to the digital table and tapped a blinking red icon. We're going to vanish their admiral instead. High Admiral Varnock of the Vex was not a patient creature. His people had never needed patience. When your civilization is built on fear and scorched planets, diplomacy becomes just a way to pass time between genocides. So when his fleet's flagship, the Vengeance of Stars, entered the neutral zone, he expected one of two things. Earth would send a message. Earth would make a mistake. Instead, the ship's lights flickered. No weapons fired. No alert. Just flicker. Then the bridge went dark. The command table glitched, and standing where his chief technician had been, there was a box. A small, plain box. Wooden. Varnock blinked. Where did that come from? No one answered. He reached out, claws hesitant now, and lifted the lid. Inside, a human military tag, a broken Terran rifle bolt, a folded note. He opened it. You killed billions. This is your reminder we're tracking individuals now. Your fleet isn't next. You are. The bridge lights returned. Every crew member was still frozen, except one. Varnock's second-in-command, Commander Traval, stood behind him, holding a tablet. Sir, he whispered, we're not alone on this ship. Meanwhile, in Council sectors, Earth's silence was finally punctured. By results, entire Vex resource routes had collapsed. Mining rigs exploded mysteriously. Mercenaries they'd hired defected without reason. Planets that once bowed to Vex tribute now raised Earth's flags, silently, rebelliously, like conquered people waiting for liberation. Not because Earth promised peace, but because they promised consequences. Back on Earth, Director Okonkwo stood in a sealed chamber beneath Geneva. A war room not seen in a century. Screens filled with real-time feeds, covert ops, fleet movements, intercepted Vex panic signals. Next to her stood Colonel Ren Torres, Earth's leading intelligence strategist and a man with the patience of a caffeinated mongoose. We're ahead of schedule, he muttered, tapping data streams. Fleet disassembly in Quadrant T-9 complete. They're calling it sabotage. One of their admirals had a full nervous breakdown after receiving a children's show in his dreams. Okonkwo raised an eyebrow. Which one? Barney, with Russian dubs. Repeating forever. He tried to scratch his eyes out. She nodded once. Psychological warfare's more humane than nuclear footprints. Ren shrugged. Humane. Sure, but terrifyingly effective. She glanced toward the screen. Good. Let them start wondering if death is actually the best outcome. In the Vex War Council, panic finally reached the throne. Empress Sirala, iron-plated and cruel beyond measurement, slammed her fists into the projection console. I want blood. No one responded. I want Earth's homeworld turned to vapor. Their cities, glass, their leaders, dragged before me in chains. Still, silence. Because her admirals were afraid to tell her the truth. They couldn't find Earth's fleet. The humans weren't hiding. They were everywhere and nowhere. Shadow fleets warping in and out without detection, intel divisions dismantling planetary infrastructure, AI systems seeding confusion across entire networks. A junior advisor finally coughed. Your Highness, with all due respect, we may be facing a historical issue. Sirala narrowed her eyes. Speak. He swallowed. Humanity has a backlog of unsent retaliation. They're not just fighting this war. They're releasing centuries of suppression. A pause. Like, they've been holding back. Deep in the red-washed orbit of Tau-Clis III, where a hidden Vex military outpost had operated for decades without detection, something began to descend. It wasn't on sensors, wasn't visible to satellites. It just arrived. The station's perimeter alarms didn't go off. The AI couldn't register what it was, just static, until a single camera, analog, caught a shape. Not a fleet, a man, standing, in a suit, breathing in space, staring directly into the camera lens. He held up a sign. "Remember Nanking?" Then everything went dark. The station didn't explode. It was erased. In the council chambers, panic debates turned into formal pleadings. Species began calling on Earth to explain their actions, to justify their vengeance, to slow down. Earth didn't answer, but the universe did. Streamline, the social feed once mocked for its memes and cat videos, was now the site of the most chilling upload in recent galactic memory. A 2-minute montage, human atrocities, not to boast, but to remind. Narrated with a calm, female voice. "We didn't ask for this war, but you should know, we were built for it. While you debated morality, we documented consequences. We etched them in stone, buried them in ash, and carried them in song. You committed genocide. We just finally remembered who we are." The video ended with an old Earth proverb, "Beware the fury of a patient man." The Vex began to flee, not retreat, flee. Entire fleets abandoned posts. Colonies declared independence. Internal coups sparked within their command. Because the horror wasn't just in the losses, it was in the surgical nature of the attacks. Earth didn't strike at their military. They struck at memory. Every massacre the Vex had ever committed. Humans retaliated for that. Chronologically. By name. And now? Now they were arriving at present day. On board Gravedancer, Admiral Jules Thorne lit a cigar for the first time in 20 years. He watched as a Vex surrender fleet warped into position. No flags, no negotiators, just silence. "Should we respond, sir?" his XO asked. Jules took a slow puff. "Nah." He looked out into the stars. "Let them sit in it a while longer." Meanwhile, Okonkwo sat at her desk. A notification blinked. She opened the new message. A simple reply from Earth's cultural archives. "The ancient war records you requested have been declassified. Uploading full history of the 20th to the 21st century human conflicts. Warning, contains disturbing content. Viewer discretion is advised." Okonkwo smiled faintly. Perfect. She pressed send to all council delegates. Time to remind the galaxy what Earth had been before it decided to be nice. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the most well-attended in history. Every seat was filled. Even species that hadn't participated in council politics for decades sent delegates in person. Some limped in with broken translation equipment. Others arrived with flags turned upside down in shame or fear. No one was late, except Earth. And that was what terrified everyone the most. High Arbiter Voon's voice trembled, not from weakness, but from the terrible burden of knowing he'd been wrong. For years, he'd labeled humanity as volatile but containable, a species prone to emotional flair, but harmless if corralled by treaties and commerce. Now, he watched as newsfeeds showed another Vex war factory, planet-sized, disassembled overnight, its infrastructure repurposed to terraform a refugee world the humans weren't even obligated to help. They were erasing the enemy and restoring the victims, one motion at a time, without a vote, without approval, and without mercy. He stood in the center of the council hall, looking at the holographic projections spinning above the table. A map of Vex territory, formerly the most fortified in the galaxy, now riddled with red X markers. "Esteemed delegates," Voon began, pausing to swallow, "we must together issue a resolution to Earth. A call, not of confrontation, but of restraint." A murmur passed through the chamber. One delegate stood, silver-skinned, trembling. I do not wish to offend," the Tharian envoy whispered. "But what happens if they say no?" No one answered, because the answer was already here. Across dozens of star systems, Earth's ghost fleet was no longer hiding. Now they were resettling. They began building medical stations in orbit around war-torn planets. They cleared debris fields that had floated since ancient wars no other species had the courage to clean. They sent ships to evacuate stranded Vex civilians, children, outcasts, forgotten colonies. And they fed them. That's what disturbed the galaxy the most. Not the vengeance, not the precision, the compassion. Because Earth wasn't just punishing evil. They were doing the work the rest of the galaxy never bothered to try. And yet, every time a Ghost Fleet commander was asked why, the answer was the same. Because if we don't, we're just like them. Vex transmissions grew quieter with each passing day. Their high command had splintered into internal civil war. Empress Sirala disappeared. Some say she was overthrown. Others whispered, Earth let her escape so she'd have to live with what she'd done. There were even rumors her ship was orbiting Earth right now, invisible, its occupants watching in forced silence as the world they tried to destroy rose to become the galaxy's moral center. In the war chamber under Geneva, Director Okonkwo stared at a single datapad. It held a formal message from the Council. Earth's actions, while effective, must be paused to allow for organized resolution and recovery. We request a full ceasefire, followed by supervised negotiation. We also offer to elevate Earth to a permanent high seat on the Council. Okonkwo snorted. Ren Torres, standing nearby, looked up from his console. They finally offering bribes. She handed him the pad. They're offering peace. Ren read it, then shrugged. They're late. No. Okonkwo leaned back. They're finally scared enough to mean it. That's new. He hesitated. So what now? She smiled. We go to the Council. Diplomatically? No. She folded her hands. Historically. The Council chamber dimmed as Earth's delegation finally entered. Not via sleek shuttle or teleportation array, but on foot. They came in through the main doors. 20 humans in full ceremonial armor, carbon black, red trimmed, each set modeled after historical military eras. One wore World War II leathers, another the EVA combat suit of the Mars Terraformation Corps. One even bore the old cloak of the Earth resistance from the Age of Collapse. No weapons, but the air shifted as they walked, as if history itself had entered the room. At their center walked Director Okonkwo. She carried no documents, only a small metal box. She placed it in front of High Arbiter Voon and opened it. Inside was a book, a physical one, leather-bound, faded. It read, Earth, Wars of the 20th Century. The room went silent. The Council chamber dimmed as Earth's delegation finally entered, not via sleek shuttle or teleportation array, but on foot. They came in through the main doors. 20 humans in full ceremonial armor, carbon black, red trimmed, each set modeled after historical military eras. One wore World War II leathers, another the EVA combat suit of the Mars Terraformation Corps. One even bore the old cloak of the Earth resistance from the Age of Collapse. No weapons. But the air shifted as they walked, as if history itself had entered the room. At their center walked Director Okonkwo. She carried no documents, only a small metal box. She placed it in front of High Arbiter Voon and opened it. Inside was a book, a physical one, leather-bound, faded. It read, Earth, Wars of the 20th Century. The room went silent. Want to go back to being civilized? He looked up at the sky. At some point, he murmured, but not because they're scared. He looked back down. When we're ready. When it's real. Okonkwo's voice softened. Think they'll ever understand why we did it? Jules exhaled. No. He turned toward the sea. But they'll never forget we did. The war ended not with surrender, not with parades, not even with treaties. It ended with silence. The kind of silence that follows a thunderstorm no one believed would ever pass. Just the slow, haunting realization that the world has changed. Not from fire, but from choice. Earth had acted. Now the galaxy was left to live with what that meant. 6 weeks after the Vex's last stronghold fell, not to bombs, but to a blockade of humanitarian aid and hacking drones, the Council reconvened. But this time, they didn't meet in the Stellar Council core. They met on Earth, Geneva. Because Earth didn't ask. They invited. And everyone came. Even the species that once called humanity unpredictable, uncivilized, and too emotionally volatile to ever sit at the grown-ups table. Now, those same delegates took careful notes when human schoolchildren asked thoughtful questions about ethics and war. They watched human veterans bow their heads at the graves of not just their own fallen, but the Lumin, the refugees, even the Vex defectors. And they realized, this was not a victory. This was a reckoning. In the rebuilt chamber, now called the Forum of Justice, Director Okonkwo took the central seat. Not as a ruler, but as a moderator. Earth had refused a high seat, refused the offer to become an enforcer of council law. "We don't want titles," Okonkwo had said, her voice as steel as ever. "We want progress." So the council asked, "What does Earth want?" And Earth gave a list. It wasn't military. It wasn't economic. It was memorialization. Every genocide must be documented, publicly. No species is exempt. Transparency. Council meetings are now open to all member species. No backdoor lobbying. Intervention protocols. If a genocide is detected and no action is taken within 14 days, any member can intervene, legally. Justice panels. Mixed species courts with rotating leadership to try war criminals, effective immediately. And finally, the Lumin Pact, a pledge that no species, regardless of size or strength, shall ever be allowed to disappear in silence again. It passed, unanimously. Even the Vex's new provisional government signed it. Meanwhile, Earth went quiet. No more Ghost Fleet sightings, no covert strikes. Instead, they built libraries on war-torn moons. They shared food tech with former rivals. They taught the children of former enemies how to grow Earth's most resilient plant, the potato. If it can survive in Ireland, the agricultural advisor joked, it can survive on Phyron 6. Admiral Jules Thorne retired. He never gave a victory speech, just a message to his fleet. "We don't win by being better at war. We win by making war something they'll never want to start again." He spent his last days mentoring alien cadets on ethics in battle. One asked him if humanity had become the galaxy's police force. He laughed. "No, kid. We're the smoke alarm." The Vex world still smoldered, not in flames, but in memory. Entire cities were turned into museums, not by force, by example. Earth sent teams of historians, architects, survivors, not to rewrite the Vex's history, but to help them own it. In one quiet moment, on the ruined steps of a former Vex indoctrination center, a child, a real, born-in-peace Vex child, stood before a wall-sized hologram of the Lumin and asked her father, "Why did they stop being afraid of us?" Her father, a former commander now working as a logistics officer, whispered, "They didn't. They just stopped being willing to wait." Back on Earth, Director Okonkwo finally stood down. Not because of pressure, because she'd planned it all along. She gave one last interview. No fanfare. Just one line that echoed across the galaxy. "You called us monsters. Then you asked us to be heroes. We chose to be human. Learn what that means." She walked away before they could ask questions. In a quiet classroom orbiting Saturn, a human child raised her hand during history class. "Miss Araya," she asked, "why did the humans wait so long before fighting back?" Her teacher smiled. "Because being civilized means you try everything else first." Another child raised his hand. "But what if the bad guys just keep hurting people?" This time, the teacher didn't smile. She just said, "Then you remind them why we stopped being monsters in the first place." A final message went out from Earth. No press, no PR, Just a single transmission, recorded and sent to every species in the galaxy. A human voice, calm, steady, unmistakably ordinary, spoke against a background of stars. We're not coming to rule. We're not coming to save. We're not even coming to fight. We just want peace. But if you ever forget what that word means, we still remember where we buried the instructions. Then it ended. No threats, no coordinates, just stars. And silence. And that silence, it wasn't fear. Not anymore. It was respect. The kind born from realization. That Earth, the death world, the myth, the latecomer, had just rewritten the rules. Not with domination, but with decency sharpened like a blade. And in the ashes of genocide, the galaxy began to grow something new, something impossible. Hope.